Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. I wonder if you're also concerned about the freedom of speech in our country. There are a whole lot of things are happening. Just recently, actually last night, the only Palestinian American elected to the US Congress, House of Representatives censored her for her speech. What's happening to freedom of speech? Someone who fights for the civil rights of everyone, including Muslim community, Zahra Billoo is with us, a fearless Muslim leader and executive director of CARE Northern California. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam and peace be with you. Zahra, do you really think it's a serious challenge at this moment of freedom of speech when it comes to speaking up for Palestine, or calling for a ceasefire, or asking US to stop funding all these bombs?
We've seen repression targeting pro-Palestine voices across the country in so many ways I have lost count. Of course, last night's example with the censure, Representative Rashida Tlaib, is the most visible example, but we've seen it with respect to FBI agents visiting Palestinians and pro-Palestine activists on the East Coast. We've seen it with universities targeting students for justice and Palestine chapters very openly and dechartering them, canceling their events, and so on. We've seen it at workplaces where employees have been targeted for their on-work and off-work activity supporting Palestine. And then we've seen it at schools as well, where young children are facing harassment by their teachers, administrators, and other peers. And so it is a very real concern. And I am consistently hearing from people who are saying, I want to speak out for Palestine, but I am afraid. I don't want to be targeted. They will find out who I am. And so I'm not speaking out. And that's unfortunately a very frequent complaint I'm receiving right now, and that care offices across the country are receiving.
I just was coming in a train and I received a phone call, and it was a corporate leader who from Fortune 500 countries resigned because she was asked to monitor employees who are posting in support of Palestine or ceasefire, just like that.
So that's right. And I think that's what's really frightening right now is it's not just what you're saying at work or using work emails and work listservs. It's also what you're saying personally. And so we've seen people being targeted for what they posted on their personal social media. We've seen people targeted for their engagement in protest activity. And then we've also seen people targeted for taking down some of the pro-Israeli apartheid posters that we've seen go up in a very guerrilla fashion across the country. And so it's not just your on-work speech, it's also your off-work speech that is under scrutiny right now. And I'm so appreciative of the person that called you and said, I will not be complicit in censoring my employees in this way.
Tell me what people can do when they encounter something like that.
It depends on the situation. So at school, if it's a teacher that's engaging in bias-based conduct, you can report it to the school. And in fact, you should report it to the school. I'm telling parents to get involved on their campuses even before there is an issue, so that if there is an issue, that's not the first time that you're stepping up and engaging. But schools, right, so that's teachers. We've seen complaints, for example, of poster boards and free speech boards on campuses where campuses are, engaging in one-sided limitations of speech, and we're urging communities to push back there. Put up your posters, put up your material. Don't take other people's stuff down. Put up your own content. And then if the school comes after you and says you can't do that, then you're going to say you're being biased. But you have to put up the content first to test this, right? At workplaces, it's really important to understand what the workplace code of conduct is and what the employee handbook says, right? Knowing that is the first step. Because if you're not in violation of that and they attempt to discipline you, you may have an opportunity to push back and say, I didn't violate anything. But remember, are you union? Are you under contract? Or are you an at-will employee? And so that's going to really vary from circumstance to circumstance. Our general advice to people is to know the workplace policies, to be thoughtful and strategic about what you're posting and when. And then if your human resources team wants to talk to you about something you've posted, consult with an attorney before going into that conversation. Unfortunately, what we're seeing with workplaces is a lot of fire first and ask questions later, but by that time you don't have a job. And so it depends. The advice it varies based on the circumstance. I've been sitting in this tension. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to tell people, you can get fired in this situation. You can get disciplined in this situation. But at the same time, before being a lawyer, I'm a Muslim activist and one who's driven by my faith. And so I want to encourage community members to be courageous right now. Don't be reckless, but be courageous. And what that means is sometimes you're going to sit with the discomfort of there may be consequences for what I do. But if anything has come from this last month, it is that the people of Palestine are so courageous and they've put everything on the line for their freedom. We are sitting in the United States with the First Amendment, with, in many cases, a roof over our heads, with immigration status that is fairly secure. Again, not for everyone, so every situation is different. But if you have the privileges that I've described, then what is the point of them if you won't put them to use for good and for our brothers and sisters? And so I'm urging people. Linda, our sister Linda, said at a rally in DC recently, she reminded everyone that our risk is from Allah. And so it doesn't come from our employer, it comes from Allah. And we didn't work so hard as a community to build wealth, build power, build influence, build access to now cower in fear. So understand the risks and approach them responsibly. Know that it will be uncomfortable, but that we have to speak out. If not us, then who?
But Muslim organizations and institutions, have we been doing enough to protect our freedom of speech? Because several, funny situation is you can criticize United States, its army, its war and tax, you protest and all of those. But there is no law which prohibits you from it. But there are laws in the book, probably half of the United States, that you cannot use freedom of speech when it comes to Israel. But, boycott, a divestment campaign is probably illegal. And I don't know in what sense. But why Muslims have not challenged that through the legal and judicial process?
So there are a number of states that have laws that prohibit engaging in boycott, divestment sanctions. In some cases, for example, like California, the law has no teeth to it. So there's never been a test case to use through which we might invalidate the law because they're not enforcing it in any meaningful way. In other places like Texas, Arizona, and Maryland, CARE and other organizations have filed lawsuits and in most cases have had success pushing back against these laws. But those laws have generally targeted people who are contracting with government versus people who are at workplaces, people who are on the street, people who are at protests. So in the very many ways in which free speech is asserted and then tested, I don't know that I would agree that it's been outlawed in this many states when it comes to criticizing apartheid Israel. However, for any challenge to move forward, people have to first test the limits. They have to be willing to take on that courage, to sit in that discomfort. And then if and when they face consequences, they need to report those incidents. One of the things that we're looking at across CARE chapters nationally is that we have in the last month documented at least a 240% increase in complaints of Islamophobia. And that, I'm using that term loosely, but it's included everything recently from hate crimes to school bullying to censorship on campuses. Now, I'll tell you that 240% is still underrepresenting what our community is experiencing. As I sit in the San Francisco Bay Area, I can name more than half a dozen instances that I've either seen in the news or that have been reported to me personally where people have not completed an intake form. They have not submitted the data. We cannot fight the cases if people are not first taking action and then two, reporting. And so that's what we need in order to do more work. Our organizations have been building and working for a long time. If you were to talk to CARE or Muslim Advocates or Palestine Legal or the Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee or Empower Change, there are so many people working on the front lines of these cases and pushing back as hard as we can. But to do more, we need our community to speak up courageously and to report every instance of Islamophobia that they experience so that it can be evaluated. A lot of times what we hear from individuals is, oh, well, I don't know if I have a solution, or I don't know if I should report it. And my response to people is always, let the lawyers and the researchers do their job. Your responsibility as a community member is to report everything. We will discern it. We will attempt to see what solutions are available. We will document it and we will follow up. And so if I leave your viewers with anything, it's to report every instance of Islamophobia to CARE or any other organization that you are close to ensure that we can tell our community's full story and we can be equipped to fight back as necessary.
Well, Zahra Billoo, thank you so much for your wise thoughts. It has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for watching Muslim Network TV. Stay tuned for other programs.